back to the Prodigy Way Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about 21st century skills, and I'm joined by two really heavy hitters here. So, Jessica Peterson, she was the official guest for today, and as she was thinking of who do I want to bring along to talk about 21st century skills, she thought, who better than our founder and director, Mr. Russell Grammer.
Yeah.
So, today we're going to be diving into that. I would recommend, if you have not read this chapter in the book, first of all, get the book if you haven't already. It's on Amazon. It's an incredible read, and I would recommend reading this chapter because there is a lot to it, and we won't be able to get to all of it today, but we are going to talk about it and break some of it down. So, without further ado, this chapter kicks off with Jessica, with you reminiscing on a time when 5 of our students interviewed a potential collaborative teacher candidate. So they were the ones actually conducting the job interview. And that's not something you hear of all the time. So would you guys reflect on that a little bit here for me?
Yeah, so when we talk about 21st century skills, we talk about the 4 C's. So we're talking about communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And at Prodigy, we're always asking ourselves, how do we take these steps further? We're constantly developing how our students are interacting with these 4 different pieces of 21st century skills. And Russell is really our visionary in pushing those ideas forward. And we had a bunch of interviews to do, and he thought, well, why not let the kids be part of it?
So the preparation for the students was just to pull some select students aside and let them know you're going to be interviewing someone who might come to work here. What do you think about that? And then just, again, letting them share a little bit of their thoughts and their, what kinds of things would you ask them? So the students, sure enough, they came up with the questions. We were right here in this room. I still remember when that candidate walked through the door and students stood up, shook hands, greeted themselves, and then they asked the most outstanding questions. They really dug in. And not only that, but I just stayed in the background and observed the whole time. I didn't interject. I didn't take over. I just let them do it. And it was extraordinary. And at some point, the person they were interviewing, this is in one of them that really sticks in my mind. The person interviewing said, well, I've never had an experience like this. And this is amazing to have 12, 13, 14-year-old young people interviewing me for a job. And then she said to them, what do you think about your school? And each of them talked for, I don't know, a minute or two about what is unique and special. And it was amazing to me to hear them off the cuff describe things like, well, we get to do this. We get to interview people for a job. We get to be creative. We get to spend more time outside. But to me, for these students to be learning how to communicate with purpose, which is exactly what they did. And then listen, after the interview, the students, I asked them, what do you think? And a couple of them had some questions that they wanted to ask further. And I said, okay, well, we can do a follow-up then.
Yep.
But several of them said, I think she'd be great. So anyway, we ended up choosing to hire the person. She came to work here. And a week later, I got an unsolicited email from a 13-year-old student who was part of that interview group. And she sent me this email. Nobody prompted her to do it. She said, Mr. Grammer, I just want to thank you for allowing me to be involved in that interview process because I've been paying attention to this new person that we've hired. And I can see that she really loves it. I can see that she really cares about the students. And I'm just grateful to be part of it.
Yeah.
Like,
That's something, man.
The ramifications of that are massive.
It's an incredible experience.
Yeah.
So Jessica, you mentioned our 4 C's.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to dive into those a little bit because another thing you talked about here in this chapter was how the number one skills that employers are looking for, I believe you said in 1970 it was reading, writing, and math. And today that has changed. So what are employers looking for today, and why do we so heavily emphasize these 4 C's here at Prodigy?
So I think when we talk about the 4 C's, we're talking about things that equip students for life. It's not necessarily a school thing. It's not something that you'll see inside a typical school or that's emphasized as heavily as we do inside a typical school. But, we used to talk about, when we were talking about taglines for Prodigy back in the day, one of the things we would say is it's a life thing. We're not teaching these kids these skills so that they have them for school. We're teaching them so that they have them for life. And being an excellent communicator is a huge thing. Being able to think critically and think creatively and collaborate with others. Those are all skills that are going to carry them far in life. And so we integrate them as deeply as we can into our students' lives, knowing that this is what they need for their future. And also knowing that a lot of times those skills that we're giving them and the opportunities we're giving them to explore those skills is often more important than the content that will be forgotten. These skills we are constantly developing, we're constantly growing in our students, and they will carry those skills far into their future, far more than they'll carry some of the content that they're even learning in class day to day.
I speak to a lot of business leaders, and I often ask, did your education prepare you for what you do now? And I'm sad to say many times they say no, or they say a little bit. And then when I ask the follow-up, why is that the case? Like, I'm thinking of a project manager at Boeing in St. Louis, and I asked him, did your education prepare you for your work? Nope, not at all. Like, he was real direct, real adamant, and quick with his answer. I said, why not? He said, because what I do now doesn't look anything like my school experience looked. And I said, well, what did prepare you? He said things like my hobbies, my relationships, the people I got to know, scouts. He said I was in scouts, and that was pretty good for me.
Yeah.
So to me, one thing I hear from quite a few business leaders these days is young people that I'm hiring, they have a really tough time just with basic conversational skills. They struggle with basic communication. And when I hear things like this, it causes me to realize and think deeply that, well, we really should be equipping young people through a lot of practice so that when they step into whatever is next, they have an advantage instead of a disadvantage. So communication as a practice, our students give lots of presentations, don't they? I mean, frequently presenting in front of their peers. And then at the end of the presentation, they get feedback. Their classmates tell them, I think you did a great job at this. I think you could improve this part. And even for young people to learn how to receive constructive feedback is so important. And I remember the first few times I saw it happen, the students would get offended. Their confidence would shatter. They'd have these responses. But over time, when they're guided, if somebody gives you feedback, thank you for your feedback and really take it into account. But, do what you can to learn from it and grow. Don't take it as a personal, point telling you that you're not a good person or something like that. So anyway, practice to me, education really should resemble what their future careers are going to look like.
Yeah.
And their future experiences. Communication, I think, takes up most of that chapter. Why? Because it's something we do all day, every day. And so there are natural opportunities to help students learn how to communicate. When two kids are upset with one another, we teach them how to communicate appropriately their feelings and talk through those things appropriately, talk through those things honestly. Communication skills are something that they need for their future, but it's also something, if they can learn right now how to disagree appropriately with a classmate, how to give feedback, how to receive feedback, how to be respectful when you don't agree, how to communicate your own opinions and your own thoughts well and effectively, that is something that's powerful that a lot of adults don't have. So
Right.
it's a future life thing, but it's also just now. We teach our students to advocate for ourselves. We teach our students to speak up when they feel like they need something from us that they're not getting. I'll never forget, I was sitting, and this is one thing we do with our students, talk about communication. We sit and interview our students one-on-one, and I remember interviewing a student one time, and we were talking through all the different subjects and things, and he looked at me and he said, one place I need more challenge is math. And he was able to kind of outline for me why he needed more of a challenge in math and what he was experiencing. And because he could communicate so effectively his own needs, right?
Yeah.
Kids communicating effectively their own needs and their own desires is huge.
It is.
And it changed the course of his education that year because we were able to look at it and give him what he needed. But that came from him. So there's so much in teaching our kids to communicate effectively that's so important, even now.
Yeah. I mean, I got married recently, so I'm certainly learning the value of good communication.
Yeah. It never goes away, right? It's things that help us in our future work life, but it's things that help us in the relationships that we deal with every single day.
Yeah.
And kids
Really is
need
a
to be
life skill.
taught that, right? Kids
Yeah.
kids have to be intentionally taught, this is how you handle this situation. This is an appropriate way to handle it.
Right.
And when they don't, they need to be talked through the correct ways to do that. And in a lot of schools, there just isn't time for those conversations. I think about all the conversations I've had through the years with kids on the deck out here at Prodigy. That's where we have our private conversations. I'll say, meet me at the deck, and we go out there and we talk through all of the things that just unraveled in a certain circumstance, and helping the kids to understand what is the best. You are upset. How do we clearly communicate that?
Right. Well, processing and then communicating.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think in a traditional system, when those systems were designed to, the expectation was that the family would do that. And that's just not what we're seeing, sadly, in a lot of today's society.
For sure. Some of those things that we have always counted on for kids to learn in the home, it's not a given anymore. That doesn't mean they're not important. In fact, they become more important, right? Because you don't have as many kids that can communicate well. You know, if we are training our kids to communicate effectively, then they have an edge above everybody else who's not learning those skills.
Yeah. Yeah. So the second one is collaboration. Is that right? Is there an order, or is it?
It's not in order.
Let's just, okay. So
They're all good things.
Did you have something you want to say about communication?
I just think, again, that one of the important parts of communication that many people miss is listening.
That's so true.
That's true.
And I think because it's not always lecture based. I mean, in fact, I'd say our time lecturing here is minimal compared to the traditional model. So our students have more discussions here. And what I love about that is they practice turn taking and they practice listening. And then the teachers are so attentive to them that if a teacher sees a young person who is disengaged, they can recognize those subtle signals, and then they can give input to that student so they can sharpen it. So I think one thing I'm so grateful for is how attentive we can be to the practice of the best communication practices. Not just like I'm decent at communicating, but no, I'm very skillful with how I interact with other people.
And I would even say, like, our students and our projects take that to the next level. We had a history fair last week where there was a living wax museum, and you would go up and hit a button and you would get a full speech from a student. So this is over the top communication, right? And if public speaking is people's number one fear, and we are teaching kids to do public speaking, I heard a speech from a third grader that almost brought me to tears about Harriet Tubman last week. Yeah. And so when you have a third grader who can deliver a speech so effectively, and those skills continue to grow and grow, again, we're taking those skills to the next level, and we're introducing it to our kids at a very young age so that it's not such a fear, so that it's not such a thing that seems so difficult and challenging. It's integrated into everything we do.
It opens so many doors, because for a lot of people, that's a crippling thing.
Right.
So for them to not have that to worry about, I mean, the doors are open for them.
Right. And our kids will say that as they leave here. Our kids who graduate, or our kids who move on to other school situations, will say they've learned to communicate effectively with their teacher. My own son, who moved on to a different scenario, has said, I get up and speak in front of class and it doesn't scare me, but everybody else is terrified of it.
Yeah, so I'd love to talk a little bit about collaboration now. What does that look like at Prodigy, and how does that prepare our students for life? It's a life thing. That's a really good tab rhyme. I kind of like that.
It's a life thing.
It's not a school thing, it's a life thing.
Yeah, well, with collaboration, any good collaboration comes good communication. And that's the thing, is these things are all intertwined so effectively and just naturally that when we teach our students to be good collaborators, we're giving them the leadership skills that they need. We're giving them the communication skills that they need to be able to collaborate effectively. And again, we're doing it from a very young age. So we're putting our kids in situations where they have to collaborate, work together on projects, understand roles, understand the accountability they have to themselves and to one another within projects. It's just something that we ingrain in everything we do. And that's what I want to say about all of these 21st century skills. When I train teachers as to how they plan their lessons, I ask them to look at the content that needs to be delivered and how can we open it up and incorporate 21st century skills. So if I need to teach something, multiplication even, something as simple as multiplication facts, I can ask the teachers, okay, how can we integrate 21st century skills into this? How do we take this close-ended concept and open it up? how can we add collaboration to multiplication skills? How can we add creativity and all of these other elements into it? And so our teachers are constantly thinking about how to incorporate these things. So collaboration just kind of becomes second nature. All of these things that we do and these skills that we build in the kids become second nature in our classrooms because our teachers are putting it into their lesson plans intentionally.
Yeah, that's good. And then I'm curious as to what some of the business leaders, or I know you've had conversations with university professors as well. What do they say about the importance of teamwork?
Well, they emphasize that it is important. Number one, when they are choosing who they want to hire, I often hear these types of traits. I want someone who knows how to ask good questions, somebody that takes initiative, somebody that works well with others, someone who is teachable.
Right.
I hear these types of traits. And the thing I know about real learning is that it's messy. You know, too many of our traditional arranged experiences of learning are clean and polished. Like there's one right answer, it's at the end, and I'm the teacher. I'm hoping that you arrive at this one correct answer. And also I want you to follow this process.
There's a clear path to get there.
Yes, many times I'd say it's overly clean. What I see about collaboration is that it really brings in the mess.
Yeah.
Because learning how to work with other people, that also is a lifelong trait. And the sooner we start, the more effective someone can become and how they do it skillfully.
Right.
Because, just think, working with another person, that person might be somebody that is ready to race ahead with a common mission, and you're just going to do great things together. But many times that person has other motives. They have ways that they want to do things. There's learning to compromise. There's learning to lead. There's learning to follow. There are just so many beautiful aspects of growth in relationship and also learning that come together with collaboration. Yeah. And again, to me, the more we give students practice with careful supervision, the better we're setting them up for a whole life of good collaborating.
Yeah, that's good. So obviously these are all pretty well intertwined. I'd love to talk now about critical thinking, because this is one of the things that we hear this phrase thrown around quite a bit, I think. But critical thinking obviously is really important, and we're seeing that there's a generation or maybe more of people entering the workforce or entering university who don't know how to think critically. So what are we doing differently here, and how is that preparing our students better?
This one always makes me chuckle because we teach our students to think critically to the point where sometimes they come at us with their critical thinking questions that put us in a situation where we have to really think critically to even have a conversation with them. I mean, right. Dress code is always a hot issue around here.
Sure, it is right
Students can think critically and justify every single reason why they think the dress code should be their way. And so it really brings out the kids' personality when they're thinking critically, when they're thinking outside the box, when they're problem solving, and you can have conversations with them about changes that may need to happen or whatever it may be, or things that they don't even agree with that we're doing. But we're constantly asking them to think critically, to evaluate sources is a huge thing we start even in the young years. Where are you getting your information? How do you know it's true? These are all things that, again, we're integrating constantly.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, too, on critical thinking, because many people might use this term and not even ask, what is that? What is it? There's common sense. There's critical thinking. Are these similar? Are they different? Well, I often think of critical thinking as the ability to not just accept what's presented to you, but to be able to look at it from many different perspectives, being able to take other angles on whatever is the idea that is being considered. So what I often think about our students practicing critical thinking, one of the things we do here is ask students questions so they can reflect. So here's an example. Here's a student sitting here, let's say 10 years old. How are you doing with learning? What do you think about learning is important for you? And what are your strengths and weaknesses in learning? Just when the students start thinking about themselves as a person who is engaged in the process of making the most of their talents and capabilities, their knowledge attainment, when the students even start thinking about, what does that mean? Good grief, you've already gone to a deep level of critical thinking. And another question to students. I'm a teacher. I'm here to serve and support you in your growth. How am I doing with that? What am I doing that is optimally supporting you? And what am I doing that could be changed to do a better job serving you? So one of the things we do here that promotes critical thinking is we stay in the realm of questions. We don't want to be the disseminators of information or just constantly throwing information and answers at our students. We love questions, and we want our students to become the best at asking great questions.
Yeah. That's
And,
great.
and that is something we hear, all the community and classroom activities that we do, that is something we hear over and over and over. Your students ask really great questions.
Recently had one of our board members, a psychiatrist, MD, Dr. Brad Robinson. He came in, talked to our high school students, and he said he was proposing questions to them on an increasingly deep level based on his knowledge, his expertise in how the brain works. He's asking the students questions, and what he shared with us after his conversation with students, he said, as I was asking deeper questions to these students, I saw that they could hang with me, and they were giving me some questions back that I thought, this is something now that you're thinking at kind of the top level, that people in my field are thinking about that.
Yeah,
I mean, isn't that profound?
it is.
To think our teenagers are already asking these sorts of questions. And not only that, but critical thinking is know how to find answers too, how to use a variety of resources, and then how to pull what you need from that resource and then implement it.
Yeah.
And I think our teachers are expert with how they develop that.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of our teenagers being able to handle that too, I mean, all throughout history, teenagers were leading the world in many ways. I'm thinking of a biblical character who was named king at age 14, I believe. So obviously Mary, the mother of Jesus, So anyways, I think that we can expect them to do things like that. And the fact that we do, they rise to the occasion, and then it sets them up well. So there's one more to talk about here, which is creativity. And I know that this is one that, in the beginning of this chapter, you reference one of the most popular TED Talks of all time, which is Do Schools Kill Creativity by Sir Ken Robinson. And I'd just like to talk a little bit about how do we encourage creativity and how does it set our students up well for life?
So project-based learning, which is a huge part of what we do here at Prodigy, really opens the door for creativity. So this history fair that we just had, you could have a history fair where you give students all these parameters, X, Y, Z, this is what we want you to do, and the students do it. It has zero creativity or very little to it. What project-based learning does is it opens the floor to the students and really pushes the ideas that they have and lets them take them and run with them. And so in this history fair project, we had classes doing all kinds of things. We had some were putting on a production of a play, some were doing a wax museum. We had escape rooms going on. There's such a variety of things because we open the door through project-based learning for them to really do the things that they are excited about. And we are constantly putting new ideas in front of them. And I think the beautiful thing that happens with creativity, anywhere you try it or anytime you open the door for that, is that one spark in one student ignites another idea in another, and the creativity just spreads like wildfire. Because and the excitement that comes when kids have the opportunity to do those things and follow those paths and follow those sparks is so important to make learning fun and enjoyable and exciting, but also to see their personalities and their gifts and their talents come through in their learning.
Yeah.
And I'd like to make the point that our Creator is creative, and He designed us in His image. And so I had one of our Prodigy parents who is a creative person who once told me, and it sticks with me, he said, I think we're probably most alive when we're being creative. And I thought, there's something deep to dig into.
Yeah.
And I see it within our students. Back when I taught in a traditional kind of setup, the teachers that I would collaborate with would often say things like, we have to cover the material. And in my mind, covering the material seems like kind of skirting the surface sometimes. What I love about the creative process is when there is a spark of inspiration in one of the young people that we're working with, and they want to dig in deep, then we can say, let's do it. Let's just dig in and see what's going on. I also love a practical strategy of getting the students outside I see that when they're outside and there are these sticks on the ground and a student says, I'm going to build a fort. I was up here recently behind a 5th and 6th grade classroom. It's a yurt classroom, and they're right on the edge of the forest, and they have their little outdoor deck. And 4 of these students were just at the top level of excitement, telling me about an entire village right behind their classroom that they've invented. They have their shop. They have the little scary place over there called the Bones Brigade. They are making things back there. They've got a barter system that they've produced. As I was listening to these students describe the village behind their classroom,
It's almost like a society, like they're doing their own little society.
they're like reinventing all of human civilization development.
Yeah.
I mean, they're reliving it.
They're discovering it.
They're discovering it. I'm thinking of another time in the past when students had some open-ended exploration opportunity outside. And they were building forts and developing little civilizations and coming up with engineering systems to move water from downhill to uphill. And they had developed their own monetary system called Carmelite. And one of the students was conscripted, meaning there were a group building a fort. They had to carry heavy rocks and so forth, and they were getting tired. So they recruited him. They gave him a piece of rope if he would help them build their fort. So he started helping them build their fort over a couple of days. And then about 3 days into it, he came in the morning. He said, Mr. Graham, I've written a Declaration of Independence. And I said, what? I said, tell me about this. He goes, well, this group, they're taking advantage of me. I've already given them everything I needed to give them for a piece of rope. And I've just written to them this whole page, Declaration of Independence. I'm no longer working for them. I'm going to do my own fort now.
You're disaffiliated.
But,
That's awesome.
you know, the beauty, though, of being creative is that when they're in that creative mode, they're already ultimately inspired. And now you can tie it to so many different aspects of the various disciplines, and they're ready for it. In fact, they're thirsty for it. They're hungry for it.
Yeah.
Because they're already experiencing it.
Yeah.
I mean, creativity is top level.
Yeah.
And I think what I've found is the things that students have an opportunity to be creative with, they go deeper into the content, like Mr. Grammer was saying, but they also have a stronger memory of it, right?
Yeah.
Like they're remembering the concept because they're experiencing it on a deep level. They're creating it in some sort of fashion. And that learning stays much longer than a learning from a worksheet or from studying for a test.
Yeah. That discovery learning lasts much longer than the memorization learning.
Right.
Because people are kind of made to be explorers also. I mean, we all have this appetite, this desire to find something.
Yeah.
And here's another example of a reconciliation. Like, to me, all of learning is relationship. Somebody that doesn't like math, let's say, you meet people. I hate math. I'm not a math person. My theory is that they have been hurt by math somewhere along the way, and now they think math is threatening to them instead of a good friend.
Yeah.
It's a relational thing. It's a relational perspective. Had a group of 12 or 13 students, 5th and 6th grade, remedial math students. They said, I asked them the first day, what do you think about math? And thankfully they were very honest. I don't like it. I don't want to have anything to do with math. So I said, let's put math aside and let's make something. And then they got excited. And I said, have you guys heard of Gaga Ball? He said, yeah, we have. Do you think we could use Gaga Ball here at the Prodigy campus? Well, sure we could, because it's a lot of fun. It's a fun game. So I said, you guys want to build it? And listen, the amazing thing that happened is now the students are coming up with geometric shapes and ideas, and they're reading information, and they're considering measurements and materials and quantities and costs. They're doing the whole process of using math for a real purpose. And the end result is that we did, in fact, have a Gaga Ball pit that they built, and they could see their friends laughing and smiling and have a good time. Of course, they're having a good time in it.
Yeah.
And now their view of math is that it's not just these problems on a page.
Yeah.
Math just improved my life. So they can actually have a better relationship with that particular discipline.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I'm afraid we have to wrap up here today, guys. I know there's so much more to dive into because this is such deep and good stuff. But one thing too that I know you guys are obviously both very aware of, but I want our listeners to note the fact that these 4 C's, creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, communication, those are the qualities when you think of good leaders in your life. Those are the qualities of a good leader, and that's what really is going to take our students far.
Right.
So this will take your students far too, or your children, whatever your case may be. So, guys, thanks so much for joining me today. This is a great discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.